Happy Tuesday, folks. I'm back from my little sojourn in Toronto and watching one of the most boring 55
Oh,
minutes of hockey. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I just wanted to start with this. I don't watch much football anymore, and when I do watch, it's the Bills, which means it's pretty bad. And I think it was the first Monday night game they played in 10 years. And of course, it's against the Patriots. And of course, here's a stat for you. Tom Brady has more wins in Ralph Wilson / Rich / New Era Field than any Bills quarterback
yeah.
since Jim Kelly. And he has more wins against Buffalo than any one quarterback has against any other team in history. So, you have to sort of admit the guy is one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time.
And here's the worst part. If you're an AFC East fan like I am and Mike is, you've had to go through this multiple times. Like a lot of fans haven't had to go through this, but there was the Dan Marino era and then there's the Tom Brady era. Like if you think about it, that's 2 of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks to ever play the game.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Like I being a Seahawks fan, I follow a couple Seahawks or bloggers and stuff. And a Seahawks guy made a really interesting point during last night's game. And he said, this is who the Patriots have had as competition in the NFC East. A brief swing with the Jets. That's it. They haven't had anyone.
No, and Rex Ryan with the Jets, basically.
Yeah. Comparatively, he goes, and he was making a point about Seahawks. They had to go through the Arians years. They had to go through the Harbaugh 49ers.
Yep.
Now they're going through the I can't remember the coach for the Rams. Yeah. And it's a totally different level of talent. And what you have to face is an opposition. And you sort of forget, like, and Patriots fans are going to get all uppity about this, but you do have to discount a little bit some of the stuff because there's been no one in that division to do diddly squat other than a few efforts by by the Jets.
Yeah, but the thing is,
other than the Jets beating them in a playoff game, Mike, nobody from the AFC has beaten them in a playoff game.
Right. That criticism would be valid against the Patriots if they were like the Denver Broncos and would blow through the AFC and then lose in the Super Bowl. But they've won 5. So
they're still a great team. Don't get me wrong, but I think you get imagine 6 of your game. 6 of your games every year are basically practices. Like that's what they're getting.
Yeah, I mean they'll go at worst 4-2 and at best 5-1 or best 6-0. But okay, so I mean you knew the Bills were going to lose because their defense played great, but their offense is basically from the Stone Age. So they can't throw, and so I mean that was expected. But the trivial, and you've known this from people who watch the show, the trivial really bothers me. And when the Monday night ESPN crew, apparently was brought chicken wings to the booth. Russ, it wasn't from the usual crappy place.
Okay.
They brought them from Applebee's. That's like playing at Lincoln Financial Field and ordering out hoagies from friggin' Subway. Give me a break.
Oh, I put a tweet out talking about that yesterday, saying you got to give Applebee props for putting their brand in the heart of Bill's Mafia, because someone should have taken someone and body slammed into that table of chicken wings.
That was
just unreal.
And wasn't it my response that it says, does that mean that you have to get choke slammed through a table to get an order of mozzarella sticks? Because that's
one day in the MSG booth, they were holding up Papa John's pizza. I think they even took a bite out of it. Just think about that.
Was this before or after his rant?
No, before the rant.
Okay. But,
those kinds of corporate placements are awful. I'm sure the announcers don't want any part of it, but they have to. And then the fans just get mad because it's just like, this is when a corporation is just trying to get any kind of foothold in a market. And you know what? They're not going to sell many chicken wings.
And last thing, and this is trivial. I know this guy has been known by this name for a long time, and I get it. That's his nickname. But like a friend of mine was watching the game, and she texted me back. He's like, there's a guy in the broadcast named Booger. And I'm like, can't he use his real name? It's like, okay, you're on the broadcast, or maybe you put it in quotes, but hey, it's Booger McFarland. I mean, really? I mean, there are things to be.
Animal House. What do you want? I mean,
yeah. Oh no, not Animal House. Wasn't it Revenge of the Nerds?
Nerds. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Enough of that stuff. Let's start with the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, October 30th, All Hallows Eve, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessier, worrying about gate night in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and his real name is Anthony Darrell Booger McFarland. Now you know why they call him Booger, because that's too much.
Ooh, and I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with something we were going to talk about yesterday, and we decided to wait until the suspension was handed out. And, I think that was a good thing, because now we find out Mark Borowiecki is suspended 3 games for a hit on Cody Eakin of the Vegas Golden Knights. And this basically came – he's been suspended twice in the last 2 weeks. He was suspended, I think it was a game for the elbow on Vakanainen from the Bruins. And that one, Russ, that sort of like struck me as a, hey, Rook, here, welcome to the NHL, boom. But, this one was – now, this is the thing. I mean, Borowiecki opened his mouth a couple weeks ago saying, players like him would get suspended as opposed to other players who don't have that reputation doing something. That's just sort of like – that smacks in the face of the NHL. It's like, okay, you're just asking to be suspended if you do something that's borderline.
Well, I mean, look, the good news is he can go and focus on his communications career now that he can't play, which is faltering. And so is his NHL career. Like, I saw the hit. It looked like it was another play away from the puck. I do get that Cody Eakin can be annoying, but Cody Eakin's never going to really hurt anybody. So we're just looking at this guy now as trying to be a statement guy for a team that most people have said stinks, can't win, don't like the owner, and clearly he likes the owner. So he's on his last stand. This is like Mark Borowiecki's last stand, because he didn't even play a game after his last suspension before he did something to be suspended again. And so it's almost like he is going to just test the circuit this year. And the next one will be, 10 games, and the next one until he's not playing anymore. I could just see that happening.
Peter.
Yeah, I agree with Russ. I never saw the hit. I haven't looked it up, to be totally honest. But, given what I've heard about it, so, I'm not making no informed opinion here. I agree with you. It's the next one, it goes up, and hopefully there isn't a next one.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, and it always comes back to this, is something like 1 game or 3 games enough of a deterrent to prevent the next time? And that's the crux of, I think, where fans, at least, not the league, fans are at this with, we want to see something that's a true deterrent. I don't know if this is a true deterrent, but, the NHL, even though it acts as a quasi-judicial entity when it comes to discipline, which means you have to hold precedent into form. Well, eventually you have to just wipe out precedent and get on with actually protecting people and preventing this. And the only tools they have are either take out the instigator rule or start punishing people significantly.
Well, here's the thing, Peter, you make a great point. This isn't really a deterrent, because like I pointed out, he's done it twice. He'll definitely get a 3rd time. Yeah. He'll get a 4th time this season before he doesn't have any more season to play.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not a consequential player on
Ottawa, so that's exactly it.
They can send him out like a Cody McLeod for the Rangers, or Matt Martin for the Islanders. I'm not saying that they're Matt Martin's not a.
Here's the thing: they're not doing that. They're actually sending him out there, and he's hitting good players on these other teams. Good, useful players. That's the thing. The one was a rookie, but Vakanainen was playing well, and Cody Eakin's a very good player. So he's not even going out there to fight another pugilist. That's the problem.
No, well, let me just sort of alter let's go on the same sort of bent here, because one of my concerns about the Leafs, and Peter, you know this from watching that game on Saturday. And I think I'm pretty sure it was Trouba at the end of the first period, hit Tavares near the net, near the end of the period. Or if it wasn't Trouba, it was another Winnipeg defenseman. There was a little bit of a physical pushback. And, the Winnipeg is a big team that plays what Mike Babcock would call heavy hockey.
Yeah.
And, after the game, after the win, when the Leafs were talking about, basically how Winnipeg was playing this heavy game, their answer to how to contend with it was, well, we're just, going to play with speed and whatever, and the speed and skill, and that'll neutralize that. Well, that's not going to work against teams like Boston. That's not going to work all the time against teams like Winnipeg or Nashville that are heavy, that have bigger guys. I mean, the Leafs don't have a lot of size, and they don't have a lot of players who I think play the physical game that, not to say that somebody was going to go out and try to get retribution against Jacob Trouba for the hit on Matthews because the hit was clean. But if somebody hits somebody dirty, there's no pushback. There's nobody there to push back. And
I
lost the game. Pushback or playing physical isn't really what lost the game. I mean, they couldn't score for a couple periods.
Well, I wasn't talking about Calgary. I was just talking about
I know. And so, but if we do talk about the Calgary game, like that game was maddening because that was them playing Babcock hockey, Mike, with the wrong personnel.
Well, no, but Peter, what do you think about, because I that's a thing I think that the Leafs are missing, and I think if they're
I think they are too, and I think more teams are missing that. So when it happens, it's the slow change. The problem is when how many teams out there are going to use that obvious deficiency that some teams have. And let's just use the Leafs because they're talking about the Leafs, to have a guy running around wreaking havoc on some of the bigger guys. First, I mean, the Leafs model basically dares you to put someone like that out there and says, okay, if you're going to have a guy who's a plumber and all he can do is chase the guy with the puck, come get him, because we've got enough guys who can do things with the puck that you're going to have a long night. Right. But if he does catch him, what's the follow-up point? There isn't any. And this is our hybrid transition time, I think, in the NHL, as we move to teams that want to have faster, smaller, or let's not even say smaller. The size myth is slowly being broken down, and you're having more dynamic players of all shapes and sizes coming into the league. As we move to that, and you get away from someone who is just a crasher and banger, you're going to have a few guys who can do it but don't need to do it. And then you're going to have, the trailers left. And this is the transition point. It's probably going to take another 3, maybe to 7 years before it's really weeded out.
Right.
But we're on that path.
But
it's happening.
Everybody's got a player like that in the AHL. So if they really want to do it, they can bring a guy up for a short time and do
Penguins.
it.
Cicito.
Right. But see, and you're right about that. But what I'm talking about is a guy like, okay, we all admit that Tom Wilson was a difference maker in the playoffs last year, and in fact, 2 years ago when the Leafs played Washington in the first round, he was a difference maker because there was nobody on the Leafs that could really contend with his being able to be physical in a top 9 role and also be able to score. Now, he's an idiot, so of course he takes. He takes the suspension for the hit on Sundqvist, and he's got to learn to control himself. But players like that can make a big difference in a league that's going towards smaller, speedier, skilled players. If he's running around like a bull in a china shop, that's a guy. That's a guy that I think teams want, because
you got to find that guy. He has to be able to skate too. That's why Tom Wilson's like the only one at the moment, because you also have to find that guy who could skate. Like, otherwise they're not getting in the lineup.
Yeah. Now, games last night, Russ started to talk about possibly one of the most boring games that I have watched in person in years. And I mean, it just, and there were reasons for it. I mean, now, first of all, I think, and I'm writing about this later today. The Leafs, there's no doubt they're having success right now. They're 8-4 on the year. They're 5-0 on the road, and they're under 500 at home. And you could see the problems, if you watch that game. I mean, it was the first game without Matthews. They played, I think, sort of a close to the vest type of game, trying to not make any mistakes. And it was nothing, but it was dreadful. They were being outshot 32-16, and the only reason they were in the game was Freddie Anderson. And until
he was under siege a couple times.
Yeah, and Calgary scored 2 goals in early in the third period, and then basically, that's when the Leafs sort of woke up and said, okay, we got to play offense. And, score a goal from Kadri, think they tied the game late in regulation, which was embarrassing to Zach Hyman because he shoots it and everybody in the arena, including him, including some of his teammates, thought the puck went in because the puck hit the mesh on the outside and stayed there. And it looked like
the weirdest bounce.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was embarrassed, but I mean, if that's the case, 19,000 fans at the arena were embarrassed, but then Calgary gets the empty net. Now, the thing was, that was the first game without Matthews, and Toronto's offense was absolutely anemic. And now I don't think that's symbolic of what's going to happen over the next month to 6 weeks, but I mean, Russ, you saw some of the game? I mean, I just what did you think?
I think this one's on the coach. I think Babcock went and wanted to play that, like you said, close to the vest, but didn't really have it well thought out about what his offensive attack was going to be. And honestly, with someone like Matthews out, if you're making John Tavares the number 1 guy, you can't ask him to be that defensively responsible. You got to just let John Tavares be John Tavares and make things happen. And I don't think they really allowed that. And I think that's what he's going to have to come to grips with if he wants to win without Matthews. I think that's really what it is.
Trying to get John Tavares to do something he's never done before after like your number 1 guy goes down is asking a bit much. But an interesting thing that I saw on Twitter last night was some commentary around the idea of, is Tavares one of those guys who makes people around him better? And the interesting point was the guy that was cited was Anders Lee.
Justin Bailey,
who's Anders Lee's had a perfectly fine start to the season.
Matt Molson, P.A. Parento, he has made players around.
Lee's not going to get 40 goals this year.
No. I'm just saying, but you got to remember, the point is that is he that kind of player? Yes, to an extent. I think it's probably built up a little more than it should be.
Right.
But it's not as bad as saying no, he doesn't do anything other than for himself. I don't think John Tavares is a player who someone would say is sort of self-centered around his play. Right. That he's trying to do as much as he can on the ice. He's a creative player. He's a dynamic player. Mm-hmm. I mean, this boils down into some underlying numbers and all these different metrics that we don't need to talk about here. But it's going to be an interesting thing to watch, because with Matthews out, the spotlight shines bright on Tavares. Mm-hmm. And he's going to have to carry more of the load, and he's going to have to be a slightly more dynamic player for the team, because you just lost arguably one of the top 5 players in the league. Mm-hmm. So,
and to a lesser extent on Nazem Kadri, because he was on the third line role. And the thing is, he's stepped up. He scored
last 2 games. He's played really well.
Yeah, 3 goals in his last 3 games, which he was 0 for 8 before that. So
here was the other thing I noticed, Mike, because I don't watch the Leafs all the time.
Right,
Bogdanov was just awful.
Well, I mean, Russ, this is the thing. Going back to the size element, we know Babcock is a player who is a coach who loves players with size. Yeah. Right now, they are playing 3 players in Freddie Gauthier, who's a borderline NHLer best. He's a good kid, but he's slow. I think yesterday he hit somebody against the boards. That's the first time I remember him ever hitting somebody. Martin Marincin, who is a absolute train wreck, who was responsible for about 3 giveaways in the first period, and nobody knows why he's playing, because Travis Dermott is back from a cold or a flu that he had, and Ozaganov, who they brought over from the KHL. Now, I don't think he's been bad. He's just sort of been there, and on a bottom pair.
In that game, he looked bad.
And last night he did not look good. And they've hit, they have other defensemen in the organization. Not to say that they're going to bring up Timothy Liljegren or anything like that, but they have, Justin Hall has been a healthy scratch for 12 games, and a guy who scored 2 goals in 2 games last year. They should give him an opportunity. But but the thing is, I think Babcock is doing what he did last year. He's sort of experimenting in the first half of the season with guys who I don't think are going to be in the picture later in the year. They've got players playing down in the American Hockey League that I think are more talented than Freddie Gauthier, and they can move. Once Matthews comes back, they can call up guys. But they're not playing their best lineup now. And with Matthews out, I think you sort of have to play your better players. And last night he had switched up a lineup, and we'll get off the Leafs in a second. He switched up the lineup in the third period after switching them after Matthews got hurt. So he was like struggling for a line combo that that would click. And he had Tavares with Zach Hyman and Kasperi Kapanen. It's not Mitch Marner. So
here's the other thing too, and I would keep Tavares and Marner together. I wouldn't care about the rest. What I saw at one point Gauthier only had 3 minutes in the game. What did he end up with? Any idea?
I think it was about 6, but I'll look it up. I think it wasn't much.
Yeah, if you're playing a guy for 6 minutes, play somebody else, please.
Yeah, and then I saw the strange. There was a couple strange things in last night's game, and I'll just mention this one quickly. 4-on-3 power play for Calgary. I think it was early in the second period or late in the first. And Par Lindholm, the Leafs center, gets thrown out of the faceoff circle, and they had 2 defensemen and 1 forward out there. You had Martin Marincin taking a faceoff. That's bizarre. That's bizarre. You never see that.
I don't think I could recall that. No.
Yeah. Now, okay. The other game, Peter, you had mentioned, and Elias Pettersson just attracts attention.
Yeah.
And he did last night. It was a 5-2 Canucks victory over those Minnesota Wild, Russ.
Yeah. It's a home game for the Canucks, though. They have a little bit of buzz at home. They do.
Yeah.
But look at their injuries.
Yeah.
I know.
Tanev, Edler, Berchi.
Yeah.
Like, who else? There's 2 other guys out, too. It's unbelievable. Sutter left.
Tanev is injured? Really?
Tanev is injured.
But Elias Pettersson had 2 goals, one of them on a breakaway. And somebody made the analogy, says this is the most excitement in Vancouver. Obviously when they get to the Cup final, there's excitement, but the most excitement about one player since Pavel Bure.
It is. He literally is like taking the team by storm. And you got to remember, Brock Besser scored 30 goals for them last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, Brock who?
Yeah, he's like an afterthought.
I mean, look, Vancouver's a fickle place. Don't get me wrong, but this is unbelievable. And Pettersson, 7 goals in 7 games. Yeah. The first goal he scored last night was an incredible one-timer from a very awkward position.
I saw that. That was crazy.
It was crazy. Like, I mean, he was like a pretzel as he tried to swing his stick.
He was almost doing a split while he did it. I don't know how he did it.
Again, for those out on the East Coast, it's going to be really hard to catch them because I get it. You don't want to stay up till 1 a.m. every time to watch the Canucks play.
Today at 1:30, so I'll be.
But he's looking like something special now. He sure as heck doesn't skate like Burry, but few did or do. But he's got that special something, it appears. And but let's just let's all be reasonable. Vancouver, the Canucks need something to cheer about. Like they need something marketable. Let's cool our jets and just make sure there's some staying power here. Will he be an exciting player in the league? Probably. I think it's pretty obviously the kid is a special talent. He's unique to that in that regard. But let's not throw mountains of expectations at him yet.
I'm gonna say otherwise, Peter. If he stays healthy, not only will he be the Calder winner, he is one of the best players in the league. Like this isn't just like, hey, he's a good rookie, pat him on the head, say, let's see how he does. I mean, this guy's been proving it all along. All he ever that was ever against him was that he was skinny. That was really it. He always
and he is.
Yeah. But he's, again, one of those guys that will never, ever, ever pack on enough weight to where you say, wow, look, it's going to be like Mitch Marner. But
Mitch Marner or
Swedish Marner.
Yeah. Or Mitch Marner or Johnny Gaudreau.
Right. But here's the thing. Even with a Bure, he's a better stick handler than Bure. And Bure was a different kind of talent. I mean, this guy is a supreme stick handler, too. Right now, he's scoring goals, but he's not necessarily a shoot-first guy. And so this is a guy who's capable of scoring 70. I think I said 75 points is what I kind of think he would have if he played a full season. He's still going to probably end up with 60 points this year, and I don't know if anybody's really going to challenge him for the Calder when it's all said and done if he's healthy.
Well, it's funny, Russ, because when we were at the World Junior last December and January here, and I did a spot for Sportsnet in Vancouver, and they were asking about my thoughts on Pettersson and seeing him like 2 or 3 games, and I'm like, well, he's definitely an NHLer. I think he's going to be an NHLer next year, and he's really impressive. I didn't think it was going to be this impressive this quickly. I mean, he's just, he's not taking the league by storm. It is 7 games, but
he had 7 goals in 7 games.
Yeah, but the pace he's on is incredible. So yeah, I mean, I thought he was going to be really good. I didn't think he was going to be this
hard
good.
to cover though, too. That's the other thing that I think is starting to come into play. And Minnesota might have gotten a little exposed on this because they do have a little bit of age on their blue line. Right. You've got to have the right matchup on the ice. When Pettersson's out there, maybe, and I didn't see much of this game at all, but maybe Pettersson took him a little bit by surprise with that. But pregame now, you've got a game plan for this guy. Mm-hmm. That is how good he is. I mean, and the issue is going to be, and this is what's going to be good for Vancouver going forward. This is going to be like Bossy and Trottier. You're going to game plan for Pettersson, and Besser's going to end up killing you.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing, I had a really interesting sort of Twitter exchange with Scott Campbell, who lives in Ontario, but he's a former 1.0 Jet. He's really present in our sort of community, and he offers some really neat perspective on things. And he was saying, because he's pretty biased, because he followed Bo Horvat, but he said, we were chatting, and I said, Bo Horvat's sort of one of those guys who he's a great player. Like you want a Bo Horvat on your team, but he's sort of like Sean Couturier before Sean Couturier busted the mold that everyone had around Sean Couturier.
Right.
He needs to sort of have like what Couturier did last season for the league to take notice of really how good he is.
The offensive renaissance.
The offensive renaissance and stuff.
The only difference is though, is Horvat is more of a meat and potatoes, and Couturier has more finesse in his game. Even though
I agree with you.
A little bit of power, and that's where.
I'm not saying they're the same player. It's more the respect aspect. I'm just sort of comparing it because Couturier, he's a great player, but he wasn't getting the love for a long time, and he was doing some really good things.
Now since he's scoring offensively, now he's a candidate for the Selke. Now people are recognizing him as a.
This year he started off slow because we all knew he wasn't 100% to start.
Right.
But yes, you're right, Mike. Last year, all of a sudden, he was a Selke guy where I had him on the ballot for a couple of years because you're right. Yeah, that's when you start to get it. Yeah, Horvat's an interesting one because I liked him a lot pre-draft, and you need 3 guys like Bo Horvat on your team. You need a lot of those guys to offset the Petterssons and the Bessers, and they have it. I mean, this isn't going to be the best year for Vancouver, although it started off great, and maybe they'll be the surprise team. But there's a lot to look. I mean, just wait until Quinn Hughes gets in his lineup. If for some reason this team is playing great and Quinn Hughes' team, Michigan, gets eliminated early,
right?
He's getting signed immediately and inserted in there, and then you don't know. That's the X factor here. If they just sort of hang on and they have a chance with 2 weeks left and they're a bubble playoff team somehow, and you could get Quinn Hughes in that roster, wow.
Yeah.
It would be like Boston adding McAvoy late a couple years ago. We'll probably take a couple of questions in the chat at the end of the show, so be prepared when we ask to put your questions in there. Now, Russ, you had more detail on that the gambling MGM.
Yeah, because you knew we weren't going to get everything out of just me watching the press conference for 20 minutes, and so day after is always good. And a couple of things that caught my eye, and I'm pulling them up. So the first one is, so the NHL is not getting any of the book. And Bettman, said that apparently. And I think that's interesting because I never thought they would. Because I think, again, how do you do that? That's like public domain, right? It's like, the names are trademarked, but if you don't use logos on a betting line, how are you really going to govern that? So I did think that was sort of interesting, just that it was mentioned. And maybe it was just mentioned so people don't think that they're in on it that way, so then there's some sort of integrity issue. That may be why it was mentioned. Now, here's a really interesting one. So gambling states can get their own gambling sponsor, But again, like I said before, you could get a sponsor when you've actually got gambling in your state. So MGM's going to make out on this deal for quite a while until that's possible. Good on the Devils for jumping on this immediately, knowing that, hey, we're the state that can do this. Right. And the first one. Mm-hmm. Every team's going to want a little den like they're going to have at their arena. And Bettman says, and this is the interesting part because he is a lawyer, and I'm never going to give you the exact wording he gave, but he basically said that teams could have an opportunity to have segregated areas with like a little gambling den in the future. But that all depends on how gambling is passed, where the state that they're in. Because New Jersey, it's all the way. These other places, they might say, hey, you can't have any gambling on site in sports arenas.
Interesting. So let me tell you a little bit about Winnipeg.
Okay.
Part of the funding on the original loan to build the building was going to come from VLT revenue. What ended up happening was after the Jets came in, they negotiated a new addendum to that contract. I may have this a little bit off, but the basic gist of it is across the street and connected by a skywalk is a shark club with a bar, restaurant, and a gaming lounge.
Right.
People can literally walk out. You used to be able to walk out of the MTS Center. They changed that now. Once you're out, you're out. You can't go back and forth. So but you could walk and go gamble between periods. That's how close it was. Like it was literally 3 minutes. And so in Winnipeg, as far as I know, it's the only venue that has any government sanctioned revenue model that involves lotteries or VLTs. So given that the NHL sort of opened the door on this, it'll be really interesting to see how a city, particularly, let's look at Calgary, who needs a new building. It's a huge public fight. How can they bring in a gambling element to this to help pay for it, particularly if it's open? And also Ottawa, if they're really going to go downtown and try and do something, where are they going to get some money for this, and how are they going to help that? It's going to, you're not going to take casinos off the table if you can get them involved.
Yeah, and no, just to clarify, because I've never done the hockey gambling in Canada. The lot of I can't remember the name. I hear it all the time, but
it's all different. It's Sports Action, Sports Select. There's a whole bunch of them. So basically, it's the same thing, but you can gamble on football, college ball, baseball.
But hockey, isn't it mostly like parlays? Isn't like
it's basically a parlay. So you got to play 3 games. I think they just reduced it on hockey to 2. You can go over under. Goals scored, total points. There's a few different options in games. And I think they just literally take the Vegas line and set it out and go from there. It's not very favorable, but lots of people do it.
Yeah, it's sort of
you've got Bodog online, so no one cares.
By having the parlay system, the odds of you winning have gone down dramatically, and they know that.
Yeah,
and this is what I go back to from, I don't know, we did like maybe 10 episodes ago, where these places, if they see that you're a guy that keeps winning with them and winning at a crazy popularity, they're going to shut you down.
Right. It's government sanctioned. Russ, do you remember the guy in high school that would have the football cards?
Oh, yeah.
It's government sanctioned that. It's like, here, $5. Pick 4 games, and if you win 4, and you'd always get 4, or you always get 3 and lose the 4th one. That's what it is. It's government sanctioned that.
And for all the independent guys who exactly at high school or your dorm at university who are running those things, they made their money and kept their margins on the parlays.
Right.
It was the parlays that hooked everyone in,
right?
And that's how they kept afloat.
For New Jersey, everything was a parlay, and you have almost so little chance of winning. It's ridiculous.
It's like hitting the trifecta in horse racing or whatever.
And Peter, the trick was always when somebody actually hit the 4 teams, the guy said, "I got busted by the cops."
Right.
So you never got paid off.
Yeah.
So, I never won, so I never had that.
What's really interesting is and this will be the interesting point, is I remember when younger, we used to go down to Vegas a lot. Cheap flights from Vancouver, really easy. It was just fun to go do. And I remember going to sports books, and I'd be betting on hockey all the time, just on one gamers, because I'd be like, these guys don't get hockey.
Right.
It's so far down the list of things.
Right.
And so what'll be really interesting is MGM learns about the stuff. This is the other thing that you sort of forget. They know, like being a bookie is basically the first advent of analytics. They learn from what people do and how they bet.
Right.
And people find niches
they guy already, Peter, or a few.
Yeah. And so I remember like going, and I was like, they don't even know that this is this is the second night of a back-to-back game on this guy. The goalie had given up, like all these things. It's like, okay, for $50 there. And you'd be like, it was a sure thing.
Right.
That's and that's why you have the parlays to prevent that. So it'll be really interesting to watch what Vegas learns about hockey, and then how they start setting betting lines everywhere. Because
it's all going to be based on this NHL data that's supposed to get stepped up, like Barry Bettman talked about yesterday. But again,
and that's where they might make the money, Russ, is where
it's not there yet. I don't think it is, based on the way he was talking. So, how quickly is it going to get there? That's the issue.
And I think you're also going to see, remember there was a shying away when of DraftKings and other things a year and a half ago. They're going to gain more prevalence now after the Supreme Court decision. They're going to gain more prevalence. So, this is the world we're in, and I think the NHL is in it to make money, and I think they're going to make a lot of money eventually, maybe not right away, but I think initially it's probably going to have, like I said yesterday, initially it's going to be a bump on the cap, and NHL teams will enjoy that. So,
just to keep it real, like the deal that Jersey has, right?
Yeah.
That's ownership's money. That has the players don't get any of it, as far as I understand.
That's just in the building.
That's just in the building. They get nothing. The players will get 50% of this MGM sponsorship because that's what's hockey-related revenue. So remember, again, for teams that are able to add it in their building, maybe that's going to be the fight for the Players Association. Like, hey, we're going to want a piece of that now.
Now, I'm not to devote a lot of time to this because it's just me being an old bitterman, but I have to. I think that this celebration that's going on with the Carolina Hurricanes after wins is pretty embarrassing. And I think I saw it was Brian Burke on Sportsnet a couple days ago that he wasn't on board with it. And I guess he contacted Don Waddell, who he's worked together with in USA Hockey, and Waddell's explanation was, well, let the players do what they want to do, and okay, fine. But you know what? Honestly, it's like I have no problem with going to the center of the ice and raising your sticks in celebration of a victory and acknowledging the crowd. That's fine. But to slide on the ice or jump 20 players jumping into the board. I mean, come on. It's a clown show, for Christ's sake.
You didn't like the arm dance that Dougie Hamilton did, Mike?
What's that? I'm sorry?
You didn't like the arm dance that Dougie Hamilton did? That's hard enough to do.
Yeah. That's embarrassing when some 8-year-old is being shown at Scotiabank Arena doing that during a TV timeout, let alone Dougie Hamilton. Where did he learn that, at a museum?
What do we don't know is this an organic thing from the team, or is this part of the bigger picture? So remember last year we talked about Dundon, we talked about all these variables with him and what he's done. I got to give the guy credit. He's stripping away things slowly, and he's allowing something different to be rebuilt. If that's what it's going to take to get butts in the stands, whether it's traditional or not, if that's what's going to reshape this franchise and get out of the old doldrums and their problems and make people give them a second chance, get more people in, get engagement happening with your fans, who cares? It's not your market. It's not my market.
Right.
And every Canadian can sit up here all high and mighty about the belief of what hockey is. Well, half of us are knuckle dragging morons who would rather have guys pounding each other in the corners. So you know what? If Dundon has got a piece of this, and he's worked with people to get this out and have expression. We say we want hockey players to be more expressive. They're the most boring quotes. Nothing. This is different. Well, I don't care. If it works in Carolina, bravo. I'm all over it.
If this was initiated by the players, I don't have to like it. They don't have to care what I think. They can do it. If this was initiated by Dundon saying, I want something at the end of the games, then I have a big problem with it.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't have a problem with it, but I appreciate what he's doing. This is changing who this team is. It's changing their image, their everything. And he knows it has to be done because what was there wasn't working.
Yeah.
It just
right.
wasn't.
I'm fine with it. If you don't hear a peep out of Justin Williams as the team captain saying they don't like it, whatever, then who cares? Why do we care? I mean, if the fans there like it, and we already know that they were having attendance problems, if this helps their attendance problem, I'm fine with it. Why, I don't even know why Brian Burke would call to voice his displeasure because
I think he was just calling to talk to Waddell to get more info on what was going on. I don't think he was
like what you see is what you get. And like Peter said, for all we know, they're going to roll out something new every couple of weeks at home. Like, clearly this is orchestrated to some degree. This isn't like a spontaneous thing. I don't even think it was spontaneous when the Rangers started coming out and raising their sticks. I think someone comes up with the idea. They go over with the team and say, let's do this. The team goes, all right, that's fine. And I think they do it. And I think this is going to be done 4 or 5 different ways over the season so they can get hits and get mentioned in non-traditional television. And if that's what Dundon wants, that's fine. I have no problem. I don't know why anybody's complaining about it. It makes no sense to me.
Right. Peter, you wanted to bring up something on coaches?
Well, we today for the hot stove that Todd Cordell runs, he gave us a question. We also chimed in on it, just about coaches on the hot seat. And I think more so than in recent years, kind of remember, we're not even 15 games in the season. And there are some fairly obvious names that need to be worried. And I think, it'll be out later. I don't think Todd's published it yet, but I sort of looked at it from how hot is the seat point, like the heat level. And I sort of went from, 5 down to 1, the top one being Mike Yeo. I think it's almost boiling over into the fire there.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth discussing. Who do you guys feel is also on the hot seat?
I don't think Yo's in trouble at all. I actually think they could look at what the problem is there and they could fix it in goaltending. So I really don't think
they're going to have to fix it with Ville Husso because Allen got hurt.
Something. Yeah. I think everything else is still there. And so I don't think he's in trouble. I mean, clearly, I think if you look at, here's the thing. At some point, do we look at Florida and say the coach is in trouble again? We knew the team would be in trouble if Roberto Luongo's not there, but doesn't the coach have to win without Roberto Luongo too?
No, Russ, I think that
that's the question I'm asking.
I think that the coach in Florida is safe until Luongo comes back because they're back. Yeah. Their plan B is so dreadful in terms of a number 1 that you cannot blame Bob Bugner for that. I mean, Reimer is not a number 1. He's proved he's not a number 1. Yeah. And that team with Luongo can win. So it's clearly they need a better approach. And to me, and you can talk about Hackstall, Russ.
Yeah, he's next on the list, obviously. And
I think it's John Stevens.
John Stevens. Yeah. What about Blashill?
No, Blashill already said it's safe. They knew that their team would.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, I had him as number 2.
Yeah, they said he would be safe. The Hackstall thing, we all think it's going to happen, but we have to wait. It's unfolding. It's still unfolding. Should it be unfolding? No, most of us would have just done it already. But we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know how tied Ron Hextall is to him or what corporate has said, how tied they are together. Like, we don't know what that situation is like. Right. So to be obvious, it looks like, hey, it's going to happen today if they lose to Anaheim, but we have to wait and see. So, and Stevens, I watched that game the other day. His team did play well. Now they're playing the Rangers, so it's easier to play well, but they did. And so, again, I don't think he's in imminent danger.
Yeah, I don't think Rob Blake is like going like this waiting.
What about Randy Carlyle?
No, I don't think so because first of all, they've had They were without Getzlaf for a while. They were without Kessler for a while. Both of them. I don't know if those guys are 100%.
They give up 100 shots a night.
Yeah, I mean that's the Randy Carlisle system.
I mean, you'd fire him because your goalie basically says he's going to quit. I mean, that would be the only. If John Gibson just finally said, "I'm done. I'm going to retire tomorrow if you don't get rid of this guy and get me some defense."
And the funny thing is that it's not their defense, because their defense is good. But I remember some talk about Bob Murray at the end of the year when they lost in the first round, saying we got to transition to being a different type of team. And I think what he meant was a team based on speed. And if you're looking at that team, they've got some old guys like Getzlaf and Kessler who are not as fleet of foot as they used to be. And if you're in a speedy league, that it's tough to make that transition like on the fly. That's why teams do rebuilds. I also think, I think he would be in bigger trouble if they had gotten off to a slow start. But there was a lot of talk around Buffalo about Phil Housley, and I think the Sabres are playing well right now, so I don't think he's in trouble. But if they had come out and gone 3-6-1 instead of 6-3-1 for the first 10 games, I think his name would have been mentioned prominently in terms of coaches on the.
I'm going to go back to Bugner just for a minute though, because like last year they didn't make the playoffs. He had a good record, 44-30. They didn't make the playoffs. We all say because of Roberto Luongo. So now this year we say, all right, well, without Roberto Luongo, they're not going to make they're not going to make the playoffs. But how many games do you expect a coach to win without his starting goalie? Like there is an expectation. Like teams lose their starting goalie and still have an expectation to win games. They've won 2 games. And so you do kind of wonder, let's say Luongo's out for another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's say they have 4 wins at that point. By the time Luongo comes back, he has to go on a tremendous run just to put them in playoff position again. At some point, it becomes even too hard for Roberto Luongo to handle just coming back from injury. That's my point with Bugner. I think that's the point that we're sort of getting overlooked here.
Start putting your questions in the chat. I just got a couple little notes here, and I just, again, this is an observation. I'm not drawing conclusions based on the number of scouts at a game in late October, but it is curious. Again, following the sojourn of Kyle Dubas throughout North America last week, and it was more than we even, we had heard about Philadelphia and in New York last week. Then we heard about him in Carolina on Friday. He was in Minnesota to watch the Kings and the Wild I think it was last Thursday. So, he was, visiting four arenas in 5 days. That's sort of circumstantial evidence that something's going on here, and obviously the whole Nylander impasse is going on, and there's been nothing, not a peep in terms of progress. There is a stalemate going on here, and yesterday, for the third time in 2 weeks, Rick Dudley was at Scotiabank Arena. There were 15 scouts at the game, including a couple from Arizona. One of them being their assistant GM, Lindsey Hofford, who knows the Leaf organization because he was with them for 2 or 3 years. So where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm not saying there's a trade imminent, but I think, if the impasse continues, they're prepared if this doesn't get done, I think they're going to move Nylander.
Well, yeah, think about it. I mean, everybody would think that, well, they're not doing well, so you have to get Nylander back. No, I mean, if you don't want to pay a guy a certain price, you still don't want to pay a guy a certain price. Would you like to gain that roster spot back, though, so you don't have to play Freddie Gauthier? Yes, you would. And that's what's probably going to speed up a trade. And that's why I think a trade could happen in the next week or two, because I think that is going, them losing will, I think, speed up the trade deadline rather than the signing deadline, unless all of a sudden Nylander caves.
Right. Well, I think, Russ, that the window here is the next couple weeks, because they don't want to get close to that December 1st deadline, and that's a perception of Nylander having some leverage. They're gonna do their due diligence now when they have the leverage. And Peter, I don't think that the Matthews injury affects the Nylander situation at all. I wrote about this yesterday. They're not going to capitulate because it's not a short-term thing with Nylander. It's 4, 5, 6 years down the road. They can't afford.
The only thing that would affect this contract is if all of a sudden the Leafs offense goes noticeably AWOL and doesn't do anything. That's the only thing. And I mean, and that's got to be for 2 weeks. And then we might see some panic, but I don't think it does. This is a bigger principle issue. It's, you got to take a 30,000 foot view of it, which is exactly what Kyle Dubas is doing. He's probably going to do it with Mitch Marner. He's probably going to try and do it with Austin Matthews too. And he has to do it if he wants to keep this group together, and he needs to be persuasive enough to them and make them understand the bigger picture about this. At some point, and we all knew this when the salary cap came in with different things, that players were going to have to make a choice, the money or the environment, meaning what does the team bring? If you want the money, you're going to go chase it, and you take what comes with that. And the ones that are going to be squeezed are the ones who want the money, want to be paid for their production on the best teams. That's where the squeeze comes. And the teams that don't understand that and aren't prepared to sort of be hardline on it to that point are the ones that are now in cap hell. And this happened. It happened in the NBA when it first came in. All of a sudden, it was a lot of guys couldn't find contracts because of the cap, and they should thinking where they could get paid. And back then, it was in that this is 25 years ago, $2.5 million range. They were getting squeezed. Well, now it's guys who are in the $6 to $7 million range are getting squeezed because you need 3 or 4 guys of that caliber if you want to win in this league.
Right. And you're talking about the potential of having 3 players in Tavares, Matthews, and Marner. Now, I don't think Marner is going to make $10 million, but I think he's going to make 8.5 or something like that. He'll be up there in terms of some of the top wingers in the league in terms of salary. So you're talking $30 million for 3 forwards, and you're not even talking about addressing the position that has been needed to be addressed for years, which is defense. So that's why, I think, it's very possible they get Nylander on a bridge deal, and if they do, then this sort of delays the end result a couple years. But I've been of the opinion that if they sign Nylander to a bridge deal, that'll be the last deal they sign him to, because they'll never get him to come off a higher amount that they can't afford later on. So, okay, let's go to the chat room for a couple questions before we end the show. Russ, any questions in the chat?
All right, well, there was one, and since I didn't get an answer from Fash, I'm going to say it out loud. He's saying, what about a trade? This is like one of those sports radio trades.
There we go.
Nylander and Zaitsev for Tanev and Hughes. And I'm like,
no.
Why is Vancouver going to even offer up a player who they would have under control for many, many years? Why would this even happen for a guy that, they'd have to get signed?
Well, let me ask Peter this, because we know we can predict the Tanev injuries by the positioning of the sun.
Right.
He's got another year left in his contract at around, I think, $4.1 million. Yeah. He's been injured every single year. When he's healthy, he's pretty good, but he's a shot blocker. He's not a big offensive guy. We know Vancouver's is sort of in the transition right now. They've got Gabranson signed for a little longer. I mean, at this point, if I'm a team interested in Chris Tanev, I'm not offering anything more than a draft pick because he gets injured all the time. I mean, what do you think their sort of mindset is on him?
If the Canucks wanted to move Chris Tanev, they should have done it earlier.
Yes. And
before this whole, he had an injury stigma last year. He had an injury stigma before, but now it's just basically you're trading for a guy who might get you 50 games.
Yeah.
Might. Yeah. Right. Might. So you have to factor that into what you're going to pay and to what role it's going to have on your team. Because if all of a sudden you get the rest of the season for Chris Tanev and you're the Leafs, and all of a sudden on March 31st, he goes down and he's done for 6 weeks in the playoffs. Well, that's when you really needed him, right? Like, you'd almost have to bubble wrap him to make sure you get him when you need him. It's kind of a crappy conundrum, but if you're the Leafs, you're only buying Chris Tanev on a discount right now.
Right. And any other team that's interested in a defenseman right now. I'm just saying it's not just the Leafs. I'm just saying the market rate for Chris Tanev right now is probably a 2nd round pick, which is what the Leafs paid for 4th line centers the last couple of years.
I do have breaking news.
Go ahead.
So breaking news wise, and then I'll ask the last question in the chat room that was good.
Okay.
McAvoy's on injured reserve. He was skating on his own, Joe Haggerty reported, and then said that that was on Saturday, and then all of a sudden now he's on the IR, so that could be a setback. So that's going to hurt the Bruins a little bit. Jonas Korpisalo will make his third straight start in net tonight for Columbus.
Well, okay. Question: is that injury or is that?
No, Tort's saying hot hand, but
this is we can survive without you, Bob. That's what this is.
Yeah, because Torts didn't do hot hand with Henrik Lundqvist in net.
I've been of the opinion for a couple years that Korpisalo is capable of being a number one in this league. That they're not married to Bobrovsky.
So now we'll tie this into the question, and this comes from the chat room, and then I got some more news.
Okay.
The question is, any thoughts the Blues would, make the jump to trade for a goalie? Okay, so in the last 24 hours, the Blues did call up Husso.
Yeah.
They did call up Fabry, and they did call up Gunnarsson and Shashnikov.
Well, the thing is, though, and okay, I just saw this a little bit. I think they put Fabry back on LTIR. Something may have happened because
really? I'm not sure about that.
I'll double check.
Double check that. But anyhow, so clearly they're probably going to give Husso a start and see what they have in them. And they're not going to trade yet. But could St. Louis be the trade partner for Columbus? Absolutely. Like, I think, and could Robbie Fabry be the guy that gets them Sergei Bobrovsky? And then they have to trade Panarin? Yeah, absolutely. Because he could play at least that role. And they'd be more involved in the deal.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that is a possibility, because if St. Louis wants to rent a goalie, Bob would be a great goalie for them to rent, to have them make a run this year.
And with their deep pool of young talent, Fabry, who's been injured off and on the last 2 years, would be a price that they might be willing to pay. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. So I don't know if did you see if Fabry anything?
No, it says that I saw something that had him going back on LTIR, but the report I see here is that he may play on Thursday, so that's not that doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so
I think he is playing. I think so. I don't know. Maybe that was just a sort of a clerical thing, and then maybe he comes off of LTIR on Thursday, so they're saving cap space for the next 2 days.
So Fash says we're out of touch Gen Xers. Well, what I would say to Fash is I'm not even a Gen Xer. I'm older than that. So whatever. Jonathan S. says Letty and Boychuk have no trade and no moves. Could the Isles try to move them to hasten the rebuild if they'd agree? What is their worth? Well, I mean, Letty has a lot of worth, but I still think they have to keep him because Pulik's not a number one defenseman. He's more like a 3. And that's in the best case scenario. He's still emerging. So I don't think they can afford to trade Letty. Now, Boychuk, I don't even think the Bruins would want him back. Unfortunately, Jonathan, he is too slow at this point. And
and he's had injury problems recently. And the thing is, Boychuk is 3 more years at $6 million. Good luck. You're probably going to have to retain, I would say, probably anywhere from 33 to 50% of his salary to get anything back for him because the term is so long.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very long term. If he was on the last year of a deal, they absolutely could trade him to a playoff contender.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bruins would be interested if it was for half price because he played there before, and he still could be a bottom pairing guy, but I don't think
we know that.
I don't think he's a 20-minute defenseman anymore. I really don't.
Lou doesn't need salary. We've seen that time and time again.
Right, he takes salary back. I mean, it would take David Krejci back, or something that Boston wants to dump. I mean,
having a good year. I don't even think they'd be interested in doing.
No. I'm just throwing out somebody who had a $7 million salary, who if they signed Tavares, knows he would have been out of town. So
Boychuk is signed through
21-22. These 3 more years at $6 million. Yeah. Good luck.
That's a tough one.
You could trade Nick Leddy because Nick Leddy can still play. And you're not spending and the thing is, Russ, they're not spending a lot on the rest of their defense. Hickey 2.5, Pulak 2, Pellick 1.6, Spiza 1.5, Mayfield 1.45. So they're not spending a ton of money on the rest of them, but it's not bang for your buck because Boychuk is not a $6 million defenseman anymore.
Right, that's true.
Okay, guys, great show. We will be back tomorrow at what time I don't know, but we'll let you know. For Russ Cohen, for Peter Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.